Hello, most beautiful people. Welcome. I hope you're all doing so swell today. I hope this Wednesday is exactly what you hoped it to be, or whatever day, whenever. It doesn't have to be Wednesday. If you come across this on a replay and it's Sunday, it's Tuesday, no matter what day, quit resisting nature. Step in to that highest and most divine aspect of yourself. Step in to that highest. And you'll find that your sound is working great, like usual. All right, then, everybody. So, what's up? This is Jay Balvale, and welcome to my channel. If you're new and you end up enjoying this content where we study mostly and have some discussions and things like that, then please be sure to hit a like, share, or subscribe. And thank you for your presence. Thank you for your shared interest, because we are swimming in the waters of mysticism and madness. And sometimes, oh boy, without the help of our other swimming companions, it can be hard to know what part of the water we're in. So, shout out to all of you, for real, for all that you do. And especially, there's one of the realest of the real right now. One True Goddess, what's up and welcome in. Always great to see you. I hope you're having a marvelous day today. All right, you guys. So, I'm going to get some music playing. We'll pull a tarot card, and then today we are going to be on to chapter 3 of both of our Doctrine and Ritual, or Dogma et Ritual, as the book was originally titled. All right, Tarot, give it to us straight, huh? Tell us exactly. Oh, you know what? I got a card here from a reading I had done for myself. I better stick back in there because for all we know, she's going to want to pop back up. And knowing that card, I wouldn't be surprised if she does. Well, never mind. We had a jumper. Let's just go with that one. Okay, Princess of Swords. We've seen her before. That's a fitting card for a Wednesday, a day ruled by Mercury, by the mind. So we see that princess, that daughter, that aspect of Earth or the feminine, and she is in a defensive posture against that altar there, which could also be kind of looked at as the Earth, or what else is an altar but a place to honor that which is divine, right? And so the way she's defending that, using the weapon of air, the sword, but against those swirlings of the mind. So the reading I would get off that for the day is, well, pretty much what I just said. The way that we are using these divine teachings, but we're grounding them. And because we're grounding them, because we're actually putting them into a practical effort, that we're finding that those swirlings of the mind are much more easy to defend against than perhaps they once were for us in life. I know for me personally, anyway, that's been the case. I know as somebody who used to get real caught up in their own mind, I just don't seem to do that as much, or perhaps in a different way, but in a way that's ultimately, yeah, more grounded in divinity, grounded in that which is real, capital R, real. So what's up to everybody? Welcome in. That reminds me, I need to jump back to my other chat real quick because Vijay Kumar, welcome in. You retracted your message, but I'm sure it was saying something like, "Dang, Jay, you spitting." Well, I'm glad you think so. And once you're God, it's absolutely growth, right? Even if it's little by little, right? A baby crawls and then a baby walks, kind of, mostly falls down trying to walk and crawls around some more, but eventually gets up on those 2 feet and starts walking around. So that growth of the child, that's the aeon we're in. And so just remember that even slow progress is still progress. As opposed to just taking all of this and using it as more feathers for that ever elaborate ego, or I was gonna say that ever elaborate peacock that is the ego. Got ahead of myself there. Yeah. So rather than doing that, right, we're grounding these things. We're making them practical. We're actually using these things, and that's where these rituals of high magic, what this class, at least class A, is teaching us. Using these rituals, you will see the ways that, well, that does exactly that, but in a more magical way. Hey, some people don't need to do all that. Maybe we're just like real odd ducks in the way that we need to like draw a bunch of things in the air and chant a bunch of things, and then finally we quit being silly towards ourselves. Whereas other people, they can just like, I don't know, just not. Good for them. Thank you guys for setting the example for the rest of us who are otherwise some type of something. The time will tell, and we don't know because we're in that time, and unless we get outside of that time, well, we can't really have the ultimate perspective now, can we? All right, well, that's enough rambling. That is our tarot card for the day. Earth of Air. So if nothing I say hits, well, at very least, figure out what to you is meant when you hear the words Earth of Air. Not Earth and Air, but Earth of Air. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, let's do it. Let's get into this thing. So, chapter 3 today is going to have us talking about triangles, one of the coolest shapes in existence, and perhaps why that is. Okay, and hippo is my dream. Welcome. Welcome. That sounds like a wild dream to have. 6-7 indeed. Hippo is my dream. Okay, so of the Doctrine, Chapter 3, Gimel or C. See, that doesn't match up. Edward Waite was right. Gimel would be a G, not a C. So him having the Roman alphabet C and then the Hebrew Gimel, that just doesn't make any sense. Oh well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move forward. The Triangle of Solomon. Plenitudo vocis bina physis. Physis. The perfect word is the triad because it supposes an intelligent principle, a speaking principle, and a principle spoken. And a footnote on that says the triad is the number of generation. Unity is the father, the duad is the mother, the triad is child. One is being, two is movement, three is life. One is mind, two is thought, three is the word. The Hebrew name of God is complete in 3 letters, as the fourth duplicates the second. 3 letters represent also the plenitude of Masonic science, LDP. For the profane, they mean Liberté de Passer, and this inscription is placed on a symbolical bridge which communicates between the land of exile and the fatherland. For simple initiates, they mean Liberté de Penser, but for those of the highest order, their interpretation is devoir, liberté, pouvoir, duty, liberty, power. Correspondence with Barons Beldieri, and compare la greffe grand mysterie, the ternary is the number of creation. Okay. The absolute revealed by speech endows this speech with a sense equivalent to itself, and in the understanding thereof creates its third self. See also the sun so also the sun manifests by its light, and proves or makes this manifestation efficacious by heat. The triad is delineated in space by the heavenly zenith, the infinite height, connected with east and west by 2 straight diverging lines. With this visible triangle, reason compares another which is invisible, but is assumed to be equal in dimension. The abyss is its apex, and its reversed base is parallel to the horizontal line stretching from east to west. These 2 triangles combined in a single figure, which is the 6-pointed star, form the sacred symbol of Solomon's seal, the resplendent star of the macrocosm. The notion of the infinite and the absolute is expressed by this sign, which is the grand pantacle, that is to say, the most simple and complete abridgment of the science of all things. Grammar itself attributes 3 persons to the verb. The first is that which speaks, the second that which is spoken to, and the third, the object. In creating, the infinite Prince speaks to himself of himself. Such is the explanation of the triad and the origin of the dogma of the Trinity. The magical dogma is also 1 in 3 and 3 in 1. That which is above is like or equal to that which is below. Thus, two things which resemble one another and the word which signifies their resemblance make three. The triad is the universal dogma. In magic, principle, realization, adaptation. In alchemy, azoth, incorporation, transmutation. In theology, God, incarnation, redemption. In the human soul, thought, love, and action. In the family, father, mother, and child. The triad is the end and supreme expression of love. We seek one another as two, only to become three. There are three intelligible words which correspond one with another by hierarchic analogy: the natural or physical, the spiritual or metaphysical, and the divine or religious worlds. From this principle follows the hierarchy of spirits, divided into three orders and again subdivided by the triad in each of these. All these revelations are logical deductions from the first mathematical notions of being and number. Unity must multiply itself in order to become active. An indivisible, motionless, and sterile principle would be unity dead and incomprehensible. Were God only one, he would never be creator or father. Were he two, there would be antagonism or division in the infinite, which would mean the division also or death of all possible things. He is therefore three for the creation by himself and in his image of the infinite multitude of beings and numbers. So is he truly one in himself and triple in our conception, which also leads us to behold him as triple in himself and one in our intelligence and our love. And the note on that says the word God expresses an ideal which is unknown in respect of its essence, but is well known by the multitudinous notions which men cherish concerning it. Above all these and their greater or lesser validity, there rules the notion of a supreme intelligence and a first power. The abstract idea of those mathematical laws which govern universal movement dejects the majority of minds, which seeing human liberty, so to speak, in the toils of a vast machine, otherwise the universe, feel that, however great, the latter is inferior to man if it is not conscious of itself. Universal sentiment reaches its term here, and fantasy does the rest. For some, God is unipersonal and multipersonal for others, but it remains nonetheless that for science, God is the most probably indispensable hypothesis of a supreme consciousness in eternal mathematics. We say most probably, deferring to liberty of conscience in sincere atheists. But the Kabbalah, mother of exact sciences, never tolerates doubt when it authorizes an hypothesis and would deduce the necessary existence of God because the word attests the being as a shadow reflects the body. All right, that was a pretty big note from La Clef de Grand Mystery. This is a mystery for the faithful and a logical necessity for the initiate into absolute and real sciences. The word manifested by life is realization or incarnation. The life of the word accomplishing its cyclic movement is adaptation or redemption. This triple dogma was known in all sanctuaries illuminated by the tradition of the sages. Do you wish to ascertain which is the true religion? Seek that which realizes most in the divine order, which humanizes God and makes man divine, which preserves the triadic dogma intact, which clothes the word with flesh by making God manifest to the hands and eyes of the most ignorant, which in fine appeals to all in its doctrine and can adapt itself to all. The religion, which is hierarchic and cyclic, having allegories and images for children, an exalted philosophy for grown men, sublime hopes and sweet consolations for the old. The primeval sages, when seeking the first causes, behold good and evil in the world. They considered shadow and light. They compared winter with spring, age with youth, life with death, and their conclusion was this: the first cause is beneficent and severe. It gives and takes away life. Then are there two contrary principles, the one good and the other evil, exclaimed the disciples of Manes. No, the two principles of universal equilibrium are not contrary, although contrasted in appearance, for a singular wisdom opposes one to another. Good is on the right, evil on the left, but the supreme excellence is above both, applying evil to the victory of good and good to the amendment of evil. The principle of harmony is in unity, and it is this which imparts such power to the uneven number in magic. Now, the most perfect of the odd numbers is 3, because it is the trilogy of unity. In the trigrams of Fohi, the superior triad is composed of 3 yang, or masculine figures, because nothing passive can be admitted into the idea of God, considered as the principle of production in the 3 worlds. For the same reason, the Christian Trinity by no means permits the personification of the Mother, who is shown forth implicitly in that of the Son. For the same reason also, it is contrary to the laws of hieratic and orthodox symbology to personify the Holy Ghost under the form of a woman. Woman comes forth from man as nature comes forth from God. So Christ himself ascends to heaven and assumes the Virgin Mother. We speak of the ascension of the Savior and the assumption of the Mother of God. God, considered as Father, has nature for his daughter. As Son, he has the Virgin for his mother and the Church for his bride. As Holy Spirit, he regenerates and fructifies humanity. Hence, in the trigrams of Fohi, the 3 inferior yin correspond to the 3 superior yang. For these trigrams constitute a pentacle, like that of the 2 triangles of Solomon, but with a triadic interpretation of the 6 points of the blazing star. Dogma is only divine inasmuch as it is truly human, that is to say, insofar as it sums up the highest reason of humanity. So also the Master, whom we term the man-God, called himself the Son of Man. Revelation is the expression of belief accepted and formulated by universal reason in the human word, on which account it is said that the divinity is human and the humanity divine in the man-God. And a note on that says, between divinity and humanity, one alliance alone is possible. It is the hypostatic union of the true God with a real man. As well as, hypostatic union is a spiritual and perfect adhesion of the 2 natures without fusion and above all without confusion. The human nature is a mirage of the divine nature and participates by illumination and penetration in the divine light, which it appropriates through entire identification of its will with the divine will, but notwithstanding remain perfectly distinct, while united perfectly. It is indubitable that Jesus Christ was humanized God and divinized man, that in him there was absorption of the human person in the divine person, whence there must be acknowledged in him a divine person having 2 perfectly united wills. All this is rigorously orthodox. The orthodoxy, however, is one of intention only. All right, we affirm all this philosophically, not theologically, without infringing in any way on the teaching of the Church, which condemns and must always condemn magic. Paracelsus and Agrippa did not set up altar against altar, but bowed to the ruling religion of their time. There you go. Keep that in mind. Paracelsus and Agrippa did not set up altar against altar, but bowed to the ruling religion of their time. To the elect of science, the science of the things of science. To the faithful, the things of faith. You know what? I probably should have highlighted that, but now I'm gonna, because that right there is pretty important. And in my little oracle of saints, one of the ones I have is I can't pronounce her name, but it was a Native American girl who is canonized into the saints. Hold on, I'm just gonna pull it up. Might as well, huh? Class is in session. Where you at? There she is. Look at her. So beautiful, right? Okay, look, she's got the little birdie on her finger. Oh yeah. Venus, if I ever saw her. Okay, it's the prayer for the canonization of the blessed Kateri Tekakwitha. That's my best. I'm sorry. I'm no expert on these languages. O God, who among the many marvels of your grace in the New World did cause to blossom on the banks of the Mohawk and of the St. Lawrence the pure and tender lily, Kateri Tekakwitha. Grant, we beseech you, the favor we beg through her intercession, that this young lover of Jesus and of his cross may soon be counted among her saints by Holy Mother Church, and that our hearts may be enkindled with a stronger desire to imitate her innocence and faith. Through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay. And from my researches on this particular saint and the attempt to canonize her, was the idea that, right, where everybody else saw a very terrifying man coming to basically just despoil their lands and their ways of life, and that wasn't entirely incorrect. However, this young lady kind of realized that, hey, it might be easier to just go along to get along, but also found a very profound set of teachings within the Christian faith. And so therefore it wasn't therefore it wasn't so hard to go along to get along. And so that's summed up right here in to the elect of science, the things of science, to the faithful, the things of faith. But hey, if you take something different from it, let me know. Let me know. Maybe all you think is it's just a bunch of colonization and white man bad, and I don't know, whatever. Everybody's got their game to play, I guess. But hey, all I'm saying is this is the word of real magicians here. Paracelsus and Agrippa did not set up altar against altar, but bowed to the ruling religion of their time. Okay, well, that's enough of a digression. Hopefully you get the point. In his hymn to the royal son, the Emperor Julian gives a theory of the triad, which is almost identical with that of the illuminated Swedenborg. The Son of the divine world is the infinite, spiritual, and uncreated light, which is verbalized, so to speak, in the philosophical world and becomes the fountain of souls and of truth. Then it incorporates and becomes visible light in the Son of the third world, the central sun of our suns, of which the fixed stars are the ever-living sparks. The Kabbalists compare the spirit to a substance which remains fluid in the divine medium and under the influence of the essential light. Its exterior, however, becoming solidified, like wax when exposed to air, in the colder realms of reasoning or of visible forms. These shells, envelopes, petrified or envelopes, envelopes petrified or carnified, were such an expression possible, are the source of errors or of evil, which connects with the heaviness and hardness of animal envelopes. In the book Zohar and in that of the Revolution of Souls, perverse spirits or evil demons are never called otherwise than shells, cortices. The cortices of the world of spirits are transparent, while those of the material world are opaque. Bodies are only temporary shells whence souls have to be liberated. But those who in this life obey the flesh build up an interior body or fluidic shell, which after death becomes their prison house and torment, until the time arrives when they succeed in dissolving it in the warmth of the divine light, towards which, however, the burden of their grossness hinders them from ascending. Indeed, they can do so only after infinite struggles, and by the mediation of the just who stretch forth their hands towards them. During the whole period of the process, they are devoured by the interior activity of the captive spirit as in a burning furnace. Uh-oh, now you got some more clues, huh? To your eternal burning for your perverse ways, your attachments. Oh, those who attain the pyre of expiation burn themselves thereon, like Hercules upon Mount Ada, and so are delivered from their sufferings. But the courage of the majority fails before this ordeal, which seems to them a second death more appalling than the first. So they remain in hell, which is rightly and actually eternal. But souls are never souls are never precipitated, nor even retained despite themselves therein. The three worlds correspond together by means of the 32 paths of light, which are as steps of a sacred ladder. Every true thought corresponds to a divine grace in heaven and a good work on earth. Every grace of God manifests a truth and produces one or many acts reciprocally. Every act affects a truth or falsehood in the heavens, a grace or a punishment. When a man pronounces the tetragram, say the Kabbalists, the nine celestial realms sustain a shock, and then all spirits cry out one upon another. Who is it thus disturbing the kingdom of heaven? Then does the earth communicate unto the first sphere the sins of that rash being who takes the eternal name in vain. And the accusing word is transmitted from circle to circle, from star to star, and from hierarchy to hierarchy. Every utterance possesses three senses. Every act has a triple range. Every form a triple idea. For the absolute corresponds from world to world by its forms. Every determination of human will modifies nature, concerns philosophy, and is written in heaven. There are consequently two fatalities, one resulting from the uncreated will in harmony with its proper wisdom, the other from created wills in accordance with the necessity of secondary causes in their correspondence with the first cause. There is hence nothing indifferent in life, and our seeming most simple resolutions do often determine an incalculable series of benefits or evils. Above all, in the affinities of our diaphany and with the great magical agent, as we shall explain elsewhere. The triad, being the fundamental principle of the whole Kabbalah or sacred tradition of our fathers, was necessarily the fundamental dogma of Christianity, the apparent dualism of which it explains by the intervention of a harmonious and all powerful unity. Christ did not put his teaching into writing and only revealed it in secret to his favored disciple, which was, who was his favorite? Who was his favorite? It was Mary Magdalene. Ooh. And get you motivated. Bro, why isn't it showing you on my other chat? What's up, though? Welcome. Always great to see you. And Mario Yoshi says, Satanic, satanic, who wants to follow this evil crap? Boy, sir, you don't know what you're getting yourself into there. Who would want to follow the satanic evil crap? You just sold yourself to the devil. Nice one, nice one. Welcome, Mario Yoshi. Hopefully you learned something. Okay, yep. So his favorite disciple, Mary Magdalene, right? Get you motivated. Amen. The one Kabbalist, and he is a great Kabbalist among the apostles. So is the Apocalypse, the book of the Gnosis or secret doctrine of the first Christians. And the key of this doctrine is indicated by an occult versicle of the Lord's Prayer, which the Vulgate leaves untranslated, while in the Greek rite, which preserves the traditions of St. John, the priests only are permitted to pronounce it. This versicle, completely Kabbalistic, is found in the Greek text of the Gospel according to St. Matthew and in several Hebrew copies as follows. And I can't read Greek, so if you can read Greek and you can see what that says, then hit me up. Otherwise, we're not going to sweat it for now. But that looks cool. You know what? It almost looks kind of like elvish. Oh, that's cool. The sacred word Malkuth, substituted for Kether, which is its Kabbalistic correspondent, and the equipoise of Giburah and Chesed, repeating itself in the circles of heavens called eons by the Gnostic, provided the keystone of the whole Christian temple in this occult versicle. It has been retained by Protestants in their New Testament, but they have failed to discern its lofty and wonderful meaning, which would have unveiled to them all the mysteries of the Apocalypse. There is, however, a tradition in the church that the manifestation of these mysteries is reserved till the last times. Malkuth, based upon Giburah and Chesed, and let's see, it says down here, there's a note, according to the scheme of the tree of life in Kabbalism, Malkuth is below the pillars, of which Giburah and Chesed are the summits, and it cannot, therefore, be based on these. Okay, Malkuth, based upon Giburah and Chesed, is the temple of Solomon, having Yakin and Boaz for its pillars. It is Adamite dogma founded for the one part on the resignation of Abel and for the other on the labors and self-reproach of Cain. It is the equilibrium of being established on necessity and liberty, stability and motion. It is the demonstration of the universal levers sought in vain by Archimedes, a scholar whose talents were employed in the culture of obscurity, who died without seeking to be understood, resolved this supreme equation discovered by him in the Kabbalah, and was in dread of its source transpiring if he expressed himself more clearly. We have seen one of his disciples and admirers most indignant, perhaps in good faith, at the suggestion that his master was a Kabbalist, but we can state notwithstanding, to the glory of the same learned man, that his researches have shortened appreciably our work on the occult sciences, and that the key of the transcendental Kabbalah, above all indicated in the arcane versicles cited above, has been applied skillfully to an absolute reform of all sciences in the books of Heone Vronsky. The secret virtue of the Gospels is therefore contained in 3 words, and these 3 words have established 3 dogmas and 3 hierarchies. All science reposes upon 3 principles, as the syllogism upon 3 terms. There are also 3 distinct classes, or 3 original and natural ranks among men who are called to advance from the lower to the higher. The Jews term these 3 series or degrees in the progress of spirits: Asaya, Yetzirah, and Bria. The Gnostics, who were Christian Kabbalists, called them Hele, I think it is, or maybe it's Heil, Psyche. No, it's got to be, because see, that's where Greek, like that's why to me I think it's probably Hecate and not Hecate, because most of the time that E at the end sounds like an E. So Hylie, Psyche, and Gnosis. By the Jews, the supreme circle was named Atziluth, and by the Gnostics, Pleroma. In the tetragram, the triad, taken at the beginning of the word, expresses the divine copulation. Taken at the end, it expressed the female and maternity. Eve has a name of 3 letters, but the primitive Adam is signified simply by the letter Yod, whence Yehovah should be pronounced Yeva. And this point leads us to the great and supreme mystery of magic embodied in the tetrad. Nice. So there's a little preview of what we'll be getting ourselves into. Once we resume this class, we'll be starting with the tetragram, at least in the doctrine section, but we, for today, are now on to the ritual, the triangle of pentacles. All right, then. Mario Yoshi, so close yet so far. Oh, we're praying for you. Don't you worry. Nah, we don't need to. You can if you want. Do whatever you want. Do what thou wilt. That's different than do what you want. Don't forget that. Keep that in mind, huh? Okay, chapter 3 at 33 minutes and 33 seconds. Perfect. The triangle of pentacles. The abbot Trithemius, who in magic was the master of Cornelius Agrippa, explains in his steganography the secret of conjurations and evocations after a very natural and philosophical manner, though possibly for that very reason too simply and too easily. He tells us that to evoke a spirit is it to enter into the dominant thought of that spirit. And if we raise ourselves morally higher along the same line, we shall draw the spirit away with us, and it will serve us. Oh man. Oh no. I'm not gonna go off. Boy, oh boy, there's some real propaganda out there, isn't there? To conjure is to oppose the resistance of a current and a chain to an isolated spirit. Conjurare, to swear together, that is, to make a common act of faith. The greater the strength and enthusiasm of this faith, the more efficacious is the conjuration. So what I will say is, yep, there is a divine hierarchy, right? And so there are lower spirits, and the whole point is to, as you raise yourself, you all are, it's climbing back up the ladder, right? Jacob's ladder, the trees in their successive worlds, back up to the absolute. But I guess, yeah, if you guys want to go swimming around in nasty, mucky swamp water with a bunch of doo-doo in it and all that, then hey, you aren't going to listen to me. You're already determined to swim in it. Shoot, some people are charging you money to swim in it. All right, the greater the strength and enthusiasm of this faith, the more efficacious is the conjuration. This is why newborn Christianity silenced the oracles. It alone possessed inspiration, it only force. Later on, when St. Peter grew old, that is, when the world believed that it had a legal case against the papacy, the spirit of prophecy came to replace the oracles. Savonarola, Joachim of Flores, John Hus, and so many others influenced by turns the minds of men and interpreted by lamentations and menaces the secret anxieties and protestations of all hearts. Protestations. We may act individually when evoking a spirit, but to conjure, we must speak in the name of a circle or an association. This is the significance of the hieroglyphical circle inscribed about the magus who is operating, and out of which he must not pass unless he wishes at the same moment to be stripped of all his power. Yep, so keep that right there in mind when you're hearing people out here talk about, oh, I don't use a circle. I don't use a circle. I'm fine. Yep. Let us deal at this point with the vital and primary question whether the real evocation and real conjuration of spirits are things possible, and whether such possibility can be demonstrated scientifically. Now we're talking, all right. To the first part of the question, it may be replied out of hand that everything which is not an evident impossibility can and must be admitted provisionally. As to the second part, we affirm that in virtue of the great magical dogma of the hierarchy and of universal analogy, the Kabbalistic possibility of real evocations can be demonstrated. Concerning the phenomenal reality consequent upon magical operations accomplished with sincerity, this is a matter of experience. As already narrated, we have established it in our own persons, and by means of this ritual, we shall place our readers in a position to renew and confirm our experiences. Nothing perishes in nature. Whatsoever has lived goes on living, always under new forms, but even the anterior forms are not destroyed, since they remain in our memory. Do we not still see in imagination the child whom we once knew, though now he is an old man? The very traces which we believe to be effaced from our memory are not in reality blotted out, for a fortuitous circumstance may evoke and recall them. But after what manner do we see them? As we have already said, it is in the astral light, which transmits them to our brain by the mechanism of the nervous system. On the other hand, all forms are proportional and analogical to the idea which has determined them. They are the natural character, the signature of that idea, as the Magi term it, and so soon as the idea is evoked actively, the form is realized and bodied forth. Schroepfer, the famous illumine of Leipzig, terrified all Germany with his evocations, and his audacity in magical experiments was so great that his reputation became an insupportable burden. He allowed himself to be carried away by the immense current of hallucinations which he had produced. The visions of the other world disgusted him with this, and he killed himself. Uh-oh. Don't do that. His story should be a warning to those who are fascinated by ceremonial magic. Yep, because that's just what we see it, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's angels and demons. It doesn't matter if it's the good guy aliens and the bad guy aliens. Whatever. That's just, we just see it out here. We see these people who, exactly, they get all caught up. They get all caught up in their own, they buy their own BS. So watch out for that. As you're going around these occult circles, trying to learn this stuff, trying to practice this stuff, just watch as Is this person who's teaching me right now, are they drinking their own Kool-Aid? Are they trying to get me to drink their Kool-Aid? Keep your head on a swivel. Okie doke. Nature is not outraged with impunity, and no one can play safely with unknown and incalculable forces. It is this consideration which has led and will ever lead us to deny the vain curiosity of those who would see in order that they may believe, and we may reply to them in the same words as we replied to an eminent Englishman who threatened us with his skepticism. You are perfectly within your right in refusing to believe. For our own part, it will not make us more discouraged or less convinced. To those who may assure us that they have scrupulously and boldly fulfilled all the rites and that there has been no result, we would recommend that they should stay their hand, as it is possibly a warning of nature, who will not lend herself to them for these anomalous works. But if they persist in their curiosity, they have only to start afresh. The triad, being the foundation of magical doctrine, must be necessarily observed in evocations, for it is the symbolical number of the realization and effect. The letter Sheen is commonly traced upon Kabbalistic pentacles which have the fulfillment of a desire for their object. It is also the sign of the scapegoat in mystic Kabbalah. And there's a note saying, that is to say, in Éliphas Lévi's imagined or manufactured version, for neither is in true and original Kabbalism, nor in the commentaries of late successors like Isaac de Loria, is there any trace or notion of the so-called Templar Baphomet. For the sacrifice of the goat as a sop thrown to Satan, for the emissary goat, which is loaded with all the sins of Jacob, for a curious dissertation on the ceremony of driving forth the goat and on the confession of the sins of Israel made by Aaron and the high priest. Okay, thanks, A.E. Waite. So it is also the sign of the scapegoat in mystic Kabbalah, and St. Martin observes that inserted in the incommunicable tetragram, it forms the name of the Redeemer, Yod He Shin Vav He, which again, hey, all I'm saying is to my study and to my knowledge, that isn't even actually a Hebrew word. Yod Heshua is spelled differently than that, or Joshua. The various names of Jesus is not spelled Yod He Shin Vav He. But in a formulaic way, that doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. But hey, if somebody's an expert on Hebrew and wants to let me know if Yod He Shin Vav He is a Hebrew word, I haven't been able to find it, and I know I'm not the only one. But maybe they're like, again, hey, we're a bunch of people who don't really know Hebrew that thoroughly, so maybe you do. Maybe you can clear up the matter for us. That would be wonderful. It is this which the mystagogues of the Middle Ages represented in their nocturnal assemblies by the exhibition of a symbolical goat, carrying a lighted torch between its two horns. In the 15th chapter of this ritual, we shall describe the allegorical forms and strange cultus of this monstrous animal, which represented nature doomed to anathema but ransomed by the sign of light. The Gnostic, agape, and pagan priapic orgies which followed in its honor sufficiently revealed the moral consequence which the adepts drew from the exhibition. All this will be explained together with the rites decried and now regarded as fabulous of the Great Sabbath and of black magic. Within the grand circle of evocations, a triangle was usually traced, and the side towards which the upper point should be directed was a matter for careful observation. If the spirit were supposed to be from heaven, the operator placed himself at the top and set the altar of fumigations at the bottom. But if the spirit came from the abyss, this method was reversed. Moreover, the sacred symbol of two interlaced triangles forming the six-pointed star known in magic as the Pantacle or Seal of Solomon must be worn upon the forehead and the breast, engraven in the right hand. Independently of these signs, the ancients, in their evocations, made use of those mystical combinations of divine names which we have reproduced in our doctrine from the Hebrew Kabbalists. The magic triangle of pagan theosophists was the celebrated abracadabra, to which they attributed extraordinary virtues and represented as follows. And then you see the image of the abracadabra in the triangle. This combination of letters is a key of the pentagram. The initial A is repeated 5 and reproduced 30 times, thus giving the elements and numbers of the two following figures. And a note on that says, this discovery may be commended to mathematicians, if any, who are drawn towards occult science, and it should be compared with what Lévi has said previously on the revolution of the square. Hereof is the eternal mathematics of thought. The question is whether even a professed magus could put it forward seriously. Okay, and then here we see these couple more images, these A's in the form of a pentagram, as well as these X's and V's in the shape of the six-pointed star. The isolated A represents the unity of the first principle, otherwise the intellectual or active agent. A united to B represents the fertilization of the duad by the monad. R is the sign of the triad because it represents hieroglyphically the emission which results from the union of the two principles. So Resh is R in Hebrew, which is the sun card. Usually, I mean Lévi though, because of his thing, it becomes the moon, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, because it's all bumped down. So then it's the moon card, but otherwise the sun card. But hey, that's still, I mean, that still kind of sort of makes sense. See, that's one of those ones that kind of sort of makes a little sense, that shift over, huh? Or masculine going in to the feminine, the sun into the moon. Okay. So R is the sign of the triad because it represents hieroglyphically the emission which results from the union of the two principles. The number 11, which is that of the letters of the word, combines the unity of the initiate with the denary of Pythagoras. And the number 66, the added total of all the letters, form Kabbalistically the number 12, which is the square of the triad and consequently the mystic quadrature of the circle. We may remark in passing that the author of the Apocalypse, that key of the Christian Kabbalah, composed the number of the beast, that is to say, of idolatry, by adding a 6 to the double cenary of abracadabra, which gives 18 Kabbalistically, the number attributed in the tarot to the hieroglyphic sign of night and of the profane, the moon, together with the towers, dog, wolf, and crab, a mysterious and obscure number, the Kabbalistic key of which is 9, the number of initiation. On this subject, the sacred Kabbalist says expressly, he that hath understanding, that is, the key of Kabbalistic numbers, let him count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. It is, in fact, the decade of Pythagoras multiplied by itself and added to the sum of the triangular pantacle of abracadabra. It is thus the sum of all magic in the ancient world, the entire program of human genius, which the divine genius of the gospel sought to absorb or transplant. These hieroglyphical combinations of letters and numbers belong to the practical part of the Kabbalah, which, from this point of view, is divided into Gematria and Temura. Such calculations, which now seem to us arbitrary or devoid of interest, belonged then to the philosophical symbolism of the East, and were of the highest importance in the teaching of holy things emanating from the occult sciences. The absolute Kabbalistic alphabet, which connected primitive ideas with allegories, allegories with letters, and letters with numbers, was then called the Keys of Solomon. We have stated already that these keys, preserved to our own day, but wholly misconstrued, are nothing else than the game of tarot, the antique allegories of which were remarked and appreciated for the first time in the modern world by the learned archaeologist Cord de Gabelin. The double triangle of Solomon is explained by St. John in a remarkable manner. He says, there are three which give record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Spirit. And there are three which give testimony on earth, the Spirit, the water, and the blood. Thus, St. John agrees with the masters of Hermetic philosophy, who attribute their sulfur to the name of ether, And A.E. Waite says it does not appear that Hermetic writers made use of the word ether as a synonym of philosophical sulfur, or that it occupied otherwise any place of importance in the word book of alchemy. All right. To their mercury, that of philosophical water, and to their salt, the qualification of the dragon's blood or menstruum of the earth. Blood or salt corresponds by opposition with the father, azotic or mercurial water, with the word or logos, and the ether with the Holy Spirit. But the things of transcendent symbolism can only be understood rightly by the true children of science. The threefold repetition of names with varied intonations were united to triangular combinations in magical ceremonies. The magic wand was frequently surmounted with a small magnetized fork, which Paracelsus replaced by the trident represented below. The trident is a panicle expressing the synthesis of the triad in the monad, thus completing the sacred tetrad. He ascribed to this figure all the virtues which Kabbalistic Hebrews attribute to the name of Jehovah, you know the guy, Jehovah, and the thaumaturgic properties of the abracadabra used by the Hierophants of Alexandria. And now I'll show you this fork trident here, but then there is quite a lengthy note on that we're going to drop back to real quick that'll give us some good keys on it. Okay. So it says the trident of Paracelsus. This trident, symbol of the triad, is formed of three pyramidal teeth superposed on a Greek or Latin tau. On one of its teeth is a yod, which on one side pierces a crescent and on the other a transverse line, a figure which recalls hieroglyphically the zodiacal sign of the crab. On the opposing tooth is a composite sign recalling that of the twins and that of the lion. Between the claws of the crab is the sun, and the astronomical cross is seen in proximity to the lion. In the middle tooth, there is depicted hieroglyphically the figure of the celestial serpent with the sign of Jupiter for its head. By the side of the crab is the word obito, or begone, retire. So hold on, we'll flip back to it real quick. So you'll see that up here. This hieroglyph looking, supposed to be the crab with the obito. And by the side of the lion is the word imo, meaning, or maybe it's emo, meaning, in any case, persist. In the center and near the symbolical serpent, there is apdosel, a word composed of one, an abbreviation, two, a word written Kabbalistically and in the Hebrew fashion, and finally, three, a complete ordinary word. Ap, which should be read R, because these are the first two letters of the Greek archaeus, or archaeus. Do, which should be read ode, and lastly, sel, salt. These are the three prime substances, and the occult names of archaeus and ode have the same significance as the sulfur and mercury of the philosophers. On the iron stem, which serves as a haft for the trident, there is the triplicated letter PPP, a phallic and lingamic hieroglyph, with the words Vli dox fato, which must be read by taking the first letter for the number of the pentagram in Roman cipher, thus completing the phrase Pentagrammatica Libertate doxa fato, equivalent to the three letters of Cagliostro, LPD, liberty, power, duty. On the one side, absolute liberty. On the other, necessity or invincible fatality. In the center, reason, the Kabbalistic absolute, which constitutes universal equilibrium. This admirable magical summary of Paracelsus will serve as a key to the obscure works of the Kabbalist Wronski, a remarkable man of learning who more than once allowed himself to be carried away from his absolute reason by the mysticism of his nation and by the pecuniary speculations unworthy of so distinguished a thinker. We allow him at the same time the honor and the glory of having discovered before us the secret of the trident of Paracelsus. Thus, Paracelsus represents the passive by the crab, the active by the lion, intelligence or equilibrating reason by Jupiter or the man-king ruling the serpent. Then he balances forces by giving the passive the fecundation of the active, represented by the sun, and to the active space and night, to conquer and enlighten under the symbol of the cross. He says to the passive, obey the impulse of the active and advance with it by the very equilibrium of resistance. To the active, he says, resist the immobility of obstacle, persist and advance. Finally, he explains these alternated forces by their great central triad: liberty, necessity, reason. Reason in the center, liberty and necessity in counterpoise. Herein is the power of the trident, its haft and foundation. It is the universal law of nature. It is the very essence of the word, realized and demonstrated by the triad of human life: the archeus or mind, the ode or plastic mediator, and the salt or visible matter. We have given separately the explanation of this figure because it is of the highest importance and denotes the compass of the highest genius of occult sciences. After this interpretation, it will be understood why, in the course of our work, we bow invariably with the traditional veneration of true adepts before the divine Paracelsus. Whew. Yeah, I'll say, man, that's like the biggest note on any image in this book, and for good reason. We don't see so many deities depicted with the trident for no good reason. And my Gnosis, what's up, bro? Welcome in. Great to see you. Loved your stories today. I always love your stories. That's somebody who's really spitting. I'll tell you, my Gnosis. He's been spitting on them. Great to see you. All right, then. Let's finish this up. Let us recognize here that it is a pentacle and consequently a concrete and an absolute sign of an entire doctrine, which has been that of an immense magnetic circle, not only for ancient philosophers but also for adepts of the Middle Ages. The restoration in our own day of its original value by the comprehension of its mysteries, might not that also restore all its miraculous virtue and all its power against human diseases? The old sorceresses, when they spent all night at the meeting place of the three crossroads, yelled three times in honor of triple Hecate. All these figures, with the acts analogous thereto, all these dispositions of numbers and of characters, are, as we have said, so many instruments for the education of the will, by fixing and determining its habits. They serve furthermore to combine all powers of the human soul in action and to increase the creative force of imagination. It is the gymnastics of thought in training for realization. And hence, the effect of these practices is infallible, like nature, when they are fulfilled with absolute confidence and indomitable perseverance. So, right there, we see that represented in the tarot we pulled today, too, the Princess of Swords. Training, gymnastics for this mental, for this, oh boy, this big old mind game we're swimming in. The great master tells us that our faith could transplant trees into the sea and remove mountains. Even a superstitious and insensate practice is efficacious because it is a realization of will. Hence, a prayer is more powerful if we visit a church to say it than when it is recited at home. And it will work miracles if we fare to a famous sanctuary for the purpose. In other words, to one which is magnetized strongly by the great number of its frequenters, traversing 200 or 300 leagues with bare feet and asking alms by the way. Men laugh at the simple woman who denies herself a pennyworth of milk in the morning that she may carry a penny taper to burn on the magic triangle in a chapel. But they who laugh are ignorant, and the simple woman does not pay too dearly for what she thus purchases of resignation and of courage. Great minds pass by in great pride, shrugging their shoulders. They rise up against superstition with a din which shakes the world, and what happens? The towers of great minds collapse, and their ruins revert to the providers and purchasers of penny tapers who are content to hear it proclaimed everywhere that their reign is forever ended, provided that they rule always. The great religions have never had more than one serious rival, and this rival is magic. Magic produced the occult associations which brought about the revolution termed the Renaissance. But it has been the doom of the human mind, blinded by insensate passions, to realize literally the allegorical history of the Hebrew Hercules. By overthrowing the pillars of the temple, it has been buried itself under the ruins. The Masonic associations of the present time are no less ignorant of the high meaning of their symbols than are the rabbins of the Sefer Yetzirah and the Zohar concerning the ascending scale of the 3 degrees, with the transverse progression from right to left and from left to right of the Kabbalistic septenary. The compass of the GA, which I think is Grand Architect, and the square of Solomon have become the gross and material level of unintelligent Jacobinism realized by a steel triangle. This obtains both for heaven and earth. The initiated divulgers, to whom the illuminated Kazakh predicted a violent death, have in our own days exceeded the sin of Adam. Having rashly gathered the fruits of the tree of knowledge, which they did not know how to use for their nourishment, they have cast them to the beasts and reptiles of the earth. So is the reign of superstition inaugurated, and it must persist until the period when true religion shall be constituted again on the eternal foundations of the hierarchy of 3 degrees and of the triple power which that hierarchy exercises blindly or providentially in the 3 worlds. Bam! Man. Man, were you gathering up all those fruits of knowledge and you didn't even know to use them for your own nourishment? Were you just making courses off those fruits? Well, hey, man, do what you got to do, I guess. All right, then, you guys. So, yep, that does it this week. And that gives us some pretty good intro into this book to digest for Class A, Transcendental Magic. And then tomorrow we get back into Buddhism, Class B. We get into the Dhammapada and we get into the verses of the Dhammapada proper. So sit with these. See how for you personally you feel they sync up, they pair up. Even if you're somebody who doesn't catch these classes while they're live, maybe you're somebody who comes years later upon all this. Still, it's going to apply just as much then as it does now, most likely. I guess we never know what the future holds, huh? Unless we truly are that one in millions, really billions, maybe even. How many billions we got? 8. Yeah, there's probably about 8 people total who are on that, I would say, on the planet Earth who are in that place, and most of them are probably in Tibet right now. I don't know for sure, man. I don't know. I just talk some smack. What I do know is keep your head on a swivel. What I do know is digest and contemplate this information and put it into practice in your life. Gymnastics, baby. Step into the great gymnasium of the Lord Hermes. And maybe you will find yourself just constantly climbing a ladder. You'll be like, man, I've been climbing this ladder a while, but also I'm getting pretty buff, so I'm not complaining. All right, you guys. Well, anyway, I got it on myself. I've been digesting on a bunch. That's just how it goes. You think you've chewed it up and digested it, and then next thing you know, it comes back for another round, and then another round, and then maybe a couple more after that. But Crowley, Dion, they all said it that you should really, that's the way it should be going. If you think you've got it all figured out after one good go, if you're like, oh, hey, this means this, and then that to you that's it, well, guess what? That's one of those ways you end up buying your own BS. But I believe in you all. You know that. And I'll see you all tomorrow for Class B, Dhammapada, Buddhism. Much love. And until then, this is Jay Baldale. I appreciate you all. Great to see you all. My Gnosis, always great to see you. Get you motivated. You've been steady up in here, so I'm glad you're finding this to be very useful and appropriate in your life. Hippo is my dream. Great to see you. I think you fell back asleep. That's okay. And Mario Yoshi. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Why would we want to follow this satanic crap indeed? Well, because it's going to lead us to that one true. Speaking of which, once you're goddess, always great to see you as well. So, to the squad, much love. To everybody else, much love. I'll see you all tomorrow, and bye-bye.